Hello and welcome back to HR Stew. My name is Regina Direly.
And I'm Holly Nels.
And this is HR Stew.
Today's topic, artificial intelligence. We're talking about how technology is changing HR. From hiring to policies, HR plays a big role with AI in the workplace. In this episode, we'll dive into the AI boom and its effects. So to begin, I want to ask, what's one aspect of HR that you've personally witnessed or experienced the impact of AI? And how do you think it's changing the way professionals work?
I received an email not that long ago, and it was a letter from an employee who had some grievances that he wanted to get across to his supervisor and the upper management of this particular company. And I just read the email, and it was, I hope this email finds you well. And all of the pleasantries were in there. And you could clearly tell they used AI to generate this letter. And it was hard to really get through the weeds of the AI generated letter to say, okay, does he need an accommodation? Does he need work comp information? Has he had an injury? It was really hard to decipher what he was asking for because there were so many things.
Did you try cut and pasting his email and asking ChatGPT what they were trying to tell you?
I should have done that. I just sent him, I sent the work comp providers to him. I sent, accommodations. I'm like, where do I go from here? I don't even know.
That's funny. I actually received an email from a client. They didn't know how to cut and paste it correctly. So it showed the whole gray around it. So it was obvious that they used, specifically in this case, ChatGPT. Look, I think some people are definitely overusing it, as far as proofing and getting ideas. I think it's a great use. They're really trying to position this to not make us as scared, I think, as an assistant to make us more efficient. If you use it that way, I think it really can. I've used it in my personal life quite a bit. I know we're talking about HR, but I used it when I hate waste, and I waste so much produce especially, and I had put in, this is what I have. Can you give me a couple of meals that I could use? I had carrots, I had celery, I had a cucumber, I don't remember. And then if they give you ingredients that you don't have, I'm like, I don't have this. Can you give me something else? Actually, it gave me two different types of stews that I was able to make, and both of them were good.
Oh, wow. That's smart.
So I think there's all sorts of ways that we could use it to supplement our life. I just actually went to the SHRM Visionaries Conference. AI was a big topic, and there wasn't a lot of answers per se, but and I'm going to mess this up because he did a really good job. He was saying, as a father, if I have my groceries delivered and I have someone clean my house, and he gave different examples, and if I use a robot vacuum, and if I do this and I do that, does that make me less of a dad? Does that take away from me being a good dad? I just thought that's a really interesting way to think about it. You're still doing everything, you're accomplishing everything that you need to do to get through the week, right? If I do DoorDash, we all do what we got to do sometimes, but I think it's just about gaining efficiencies. It is going to be a time saver for us. So I use it occasionally, especially to prove things or to get ideas. For me, it's going to be who's using AI correctly versus who's not using it and how you could gain efficiencies. I think that is going to be the differentiator.
And I think there's a fine line, especially for us in what we do we're using AI and we're using this to generate every single email and it's obvious. So do I really need you as an HR company to help me if you're using AI to generate every
I don't even know
email?
why. What are you writing in an email that you need AI to write it for you? Why are you spending so much? If you can't write an email, I question whether you should be in business. Depending on your business,
right?
But if you're in a business that you don't need to send emails. Because your workforce isn't receiving emails or isn't being communicated with that way, that's fine.
Right.
And you have a one-off email that you need help with, hey, that's what it's there for. But if you need to put an email through an AI, I don't know. I mean, then you're putting too much work into your emails.
I agree. I agree.
And no one wants to hear "Dearest Holly."
No.
or
I hope this email finds you well.
Yeah, no.
And I appreciate your regard to my last sentiment.
Sometimes I wish some employees would, because when you get those emails with all the grammar and spelling errors, you're like, In today's world, we do have those luxuries of being able to use that to write you an email to make you sound a little better.
As long as I can make out what they're saying, I don't even care. I would rather use less words and get to the point in the email than use more flowery words. Like if it's 3 paragraphs, you lost me at 2.
It's going to be a work in progress. It's kind of new, and it's one of those things where I think once we get the fear and confusion and a better use of using AI in our everyday life, it's going to become one of those things where in today's world of conveniences, it's going to be an assistant. It's going to be something positive for all of us if we kind of be able to get through those first little niches of it.
All right, so let's dive into different HR functions and explore how AI and that technology might influence them. I'll name a function, and I'd like both of you to weigh in on whether you think AI would have a positive or negative effect on it, and maybe how it would be affected by AI. Let's start with recruiting. Recruiting has been one of the longest standing uses of AI in HR, but has recently come under questioning. What are your thoughts?
I think it goes down to the efficiency thing. I mean, the first things that come to my mind is, it can be something that can really help generate interview questions. If you're struggling maybe, or you want to spice up your interview questions a little bit more because you've been using the same one.
Let's not spice them up. Let's just keep it pretty straightforward.
Yeah. I mean, if you've been using the same ones for 5 years and you're like, okay, let's get some more.
Or something. Yeah.
But I think also too, I think it's kind of hard, if you automate your process too much, you take out that human effect of getting to know somebody over the phone, even over video, of being able to, see how they answer their questions. I know a lot of the times on like free job boards or applicant tracking systems, they have the option to send out pre-recorded interview questions for them just to then send a response back. You can record your response back as many times as you wanted to. So then you're not really getting that real-time reaction from that person of how they would respond to it. Where if you would get that over the phone or over Zoom.
They could actually use AI to generate the response and then record it. So
that I can see where it can be getting a little bit under questioning right now.
I just think, recruiting is so admin heavy if you're doing it correctly. And there's so much backlash on going into the black hole when you're applying. But if you have a position that realistically, just from the recruiting standpoint, if you have a position that is giving you over 200 candidates, which now we're starting to see that again, now that the market is changing a little bit, like just a lot of applicants, there is no way to reply to everybody. Like there just isn't, especially if you're in multiple positions and you have another job and, look, if they could disqualify and bring this down to a reasonable amount of people that we know meet our criteria based on keywords, that can be discriminatory. So if you can't use it for that reason, then I don't really see the benefit of using it. The applicant tracking systems can do a lot of the other automated things. So I guess I'm not really sure. I don't know. To me, it sounds great, and we have looked into it in the past, and then we decided not to use it. And this is before all this stuff came out, especially with New York and the different states are having issues with it. It's a pass for me. Maybe a year from now we'll be saying a different thing. Who knows? But it just seems not a good use right now.
I think it could send more applicants into the black hole,
right?
Or it could be picking, choosing for you, and then all of a sudden you're like, you go back and you're like, oh man, we missed those. Oh. Well, the system, disqualified them when really the human was probably going through those resumes or applications, would have maybe considered them for a role and given them a chance.
You look for other things. Competitors. You just know other things just from your knowledge of being a recruiter, being out in the market that you reference.
I know I posted a position a few months ago, and it was a remote position. There were 1,538 applicants. We did it all across the U.S., and it was to the point, we don't even know at this point how to dwindle it down in the system to really look at each of these resumes and give it really good thought. I can look at the first 5, but the other 1,533 applicants, they're not getting looked at, and they're going to get passed over.
Yeah.
So
Can I get the definition for windle?
Windle?
Windle down?
Make them smaller.
Whittle?
Dwindle, whittle, windle. So I like the in-person interviews, though. I think I told you earlier today, we should have lunch with the applicants, and
I just had a half a can of soup for lunch. I don't have time for that. But it is a good idea. Look, their guard comes down in a different way. I think you just get to know a person better in person than you ever could virtually.
I agree. And how are you gonna,
that has nothing to do with AI.
I know. But But you know that, what's the age-old saying, hire for passion, train for excellence? How are you going to learn that off a resume?
How are you going to learn that in an interview?
You take them to lunch.
Listen, Holly, do we need to give you a gift card or something?
Do we need to take you to lunch?
Maybe.
All right, so number 2 is disciplinary action. So like warnings, firings, stuff like that.
This is already a terrible process that is like completely demoralizing to people. Necessary in some cases for sure. Okay, I could see a use for it. Like you're writing up the warning. It's something that actually caused you a lot of pain. Whatever happened is causing you a lot of pain. You're writing it in a way that seems maybe a little angry. And you put it into a chat GPT and say, can you soften this message for me? Like that's a good use. However, delivering it, sending it, I don't really like none of that. Everything has to be done by the manager.
And you're not going to have all that data policy violated and relevant information. You're not going to have that, a lot of that relevant information. It's going to miss that.
Because the AI would have to be able to review all that.
Right, but this is something that absolutely has to be humanized. If you're gonna get any kind of good outcome, which should be the goal, if you're writing somebody up, then it has to be done referencing knowing the person, using real examples. But again, if you want to use it to soften your message because you're not in a good place, because look, managers are people too, and managers feel pain, I think that's a great use for it.
How are you going to use AI for a firing? I really need to know how somebody would use that for a firing. Maybe just the termination letter?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd imagine that's the case. Well, who knows? Let's talk in a year. Let's reference this back.
Yeah.
Or maybe 2 years and see what happens. I mean, in the way that I said to use it, I think it's totally appropriate.
Assisting, not doing.
Correct.
All right, the third function I wanted to bring up was talent management and optimization.
So for us, talent optimization, we specifically reference behavioral assessments. I don't see how, depending on which one you want to use, we currently are using the predictive index, but I don't see how there's more efficiency that could be gained. I mean, it's already, at least with predictive index or PI, they already give us a readout report on the person. There's not really a lot of interpretation. So other than automating it as part of the applicant tracking system somehow, I don't see how AI could be used for that.
I'm going to go with its negative.
Moving on to the next one, workplace culture and employee engagement.
Absolutely not. How are you going to use AI to help with your workplace culture and employee engagement? I feel like employee engagement is person to person, and your workplace culture is person to person, and building those relationships and developing all of those things. How do you do it without an actual person?
Well, again, here's an example of something you can use AI for. And you'll get a lot of bad results, right? Or maybe you'll get no ideas, but potentially it could breed off some other ideas. Employee Appreciation Day is the first Friday of March. We have a budget of, per employee, whatever your budget is, can you give us some ideas of things that we could use to really show our appreciation for our employees? And they'll give you a list of 10 things, and 8 of them will be terrible. Or whatever, and maybe there'll be one idea. It'll be something that you did already. But sometimes just actually the act of looking at different ideas, it's compiling information in a quicker way for you to rule things out.
I think also, would you say with AI, it kind of takes the emotions out of things. So maybe if you're someone where your workplace culture or employee engagement is in a negative, there's a lot of emotions, things are going to get mixed in, and you just don't know which direction to go. So you go there to get the ideas because the emotions are kind of taken out of that to help give a person a sense of direction. Would you say it might be a benefit then?
You have to execute whatever it is, whatever the idea is, and it almost doesn't even matter sometimes what the idea is. It's about executing it well and executing it with people and having all the leadership and managers bought in.
By people. Not
right.
AI.
The last function is going to be compliance. So general business, workplace compliance. How does AI factor into that?
I feel like it could digest down maybe some of the laws a little bit more to be easily readable. But at the same time, there's so many different ways that people can interpret laws or when they read something that's come out. Because I always think sometimes our own compliance director, she'll say, this is our interpretation of this. If you do not agree, go ahead and read yourself or ask for
your lawyer,
to take a look as well. So maybe it could be a use, but at the same time, I feel like there still needs that human element of all of us reading it and compiling together what we think.
I think some of the laws, especially some of the stuff that has been pushed out in Colorado, has been intentionally vague because they haven't decided how they're going to execute. That's literally what our employment attorney is for. Like, this is our interpretation, and then our director of compliance and policy will contact our attorney and say, is this right? And they'll usually validate, she's usually right. So I have to just validate it. And yeah, more to come. So yeah, I could see somebody that doesn't have HR, doesn't have a compliance director, putting in a very complicated, unnecessary 10-page document and saying, can you tell me what this actually means for me? We've seen mixed results ourselves, even when we've tried to do that. I wouldn't really recommend it at this point. I just don't think it has that type of nuance.
Even with the updated Colorado legislations that's came out over the past couple of years, like you said, it's vague. And then you get the FAQs or this is our interpretations 6 months or a year later, and you're like, that's not how I read that
they changed their minds.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's dangerous to put it in something. I feel it's dangerous to put it in AI and say, hey, interpret this for me and let me implement it.
Yeah, but AI also says you need to talk to your lawyer.
Yeah.
Like, it clearly says that. It's not just telling you what to do.
What is your answer? Do you think it should be negative or a positive for compliance?
I think it's a negative. I mean, especially the current AI. I think when it first came out, it didn't have a lot of restrictions on it. There was a lawyer, I think, that is getting disbarred because he used it to draft a response to a case, and he used ChatGPT, and it made up cases to reference.
Oh, wow.
That did not exist, and he got himself in big trouble. Like, he didn't even read it. He didn't even check to make sure that what it was being cited was accurate.
Right.
So
I don't think it can replace it.
So for this next segment, we go to the subreddit AskHR, where people can submit questions to HR professionals and get answers. So this user, PristineSoup8796, titles their post, How to Explain a Bad Termination in an Interview. I was recently terminated from my job. How do I explain it? Some backstory. I was recently fired for workplace misconduct. I have been a firefighter for 8 years with my department. Me and some guys were having a conversation about jousting, which of course led us to trying it with rolling office chairs in the hallway of our station with these tall plastic traffic cones that we carry. Well, I busted an 8-inch hole in the wall on accident, therefore I was terminated. I know, it's childish, but I can't change the past, so I'm asking for help. How the hell do I explain this? I have interviews coming up, and I know it's going to come up somewhere. I don't even know how to try to start explaining this. Someone please help.
If somebody came to you, either one of you, with that backstory, would you believe that that is why he was terminated, or there's more to that story?
I would never repeat that story again.
No.
And he's not obligated to either. He just has to, unfortunately, or fortunately, he has to come up with a plausible story. They can't say why he was terminated. I mean, I don't think he could say that at a fire department he was laid off, so I think he has to be candid about being terminated. Maybe he could just say that it just wasn't good for his health or something. I don't know.
It wasn't the right cultural fit because he wanted to be young and jovial and fun, and it wasn't the right cultural fit for him.
I have so many questions about his termination, though. I wish I had more information. Like, why was everybody else terminated too? Why just him? Just because he was unfortunate enough to do the 8-inch hole? But anyway, we're never going to know those answers, so I'm going to let that go. But yeah, bottom line is come up with a story that you feel comfortable with, that you never divert from, and just stick with that, because they're never going to tell why. He could say he didn't pass the physical. He could say whatever as a fireman. I'm not telling people to lie. I'm not advocating to lie.
I feel like you don't have to lie in this instance. You could say, you know what, it wasn't the right fit for me, so we parted ways.
He was there for 8 years.
Well, they got new management.
I wouldn't believe that.
They got a new lead, and it wasn't the right fit.
A new chief? Fire chief?
Yeah, the new fire chief. I've watched too much Chicago Fire. A new fire chief came out along, and they didn't get along, or a new lead came along, and he could say so many other things, like draw on some other area instead of this instance of termination.
Hopefully he's not applying for another firefighter position, because I feel like they're gossipy. I feel like that would,
and it's
if he's like going to like another city, like I feel like they're just gonna call up and go, hey, tell me the deets. You
might need to move across country. At this
another
point.
state. Get out of the county at least, something.
That's all for today's episode. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. If you have any HR stories or questions to share, message us on Instagram at hr.stew. I'm Holly.
And I'm Regina.
And we will see you next time on HR Stew.